You have been waiting for something to change, not consciously. Not in a way you could name if someone asked you directly. But underneath everything you have been doing lately, underneath the routines you have built and the things you tell yourself when you wake up in the morning, there has been this low current of waiting. Waiting for him to figure it out. Waiting for the universe to move. Waiting for something to shift so that this story could finally go the direction you always knew it was supposed to go. And something is happening right now that is very different from what you expected. It is not a shift in him. It is not a sign from the universe. It is something moving inside you. Something quiet. Something that does not feel like giving up and does not feel like hope and does not feel like anything you have a clean word for yet. It is the beginning of acceptance. Not acceptance the way people say it to you like it is supposed to feel like relief. Not acceptance the way it sounds in a self-help language you have heard 100 times. The real thing. The kind that arrives slowly, almost without your permission, and does not feel like peace at first. It feels like grief. If you've been watching yourself lately and noticing that something is different, not better, not worse, just different, this video is for what is happening inside you right now. Specifically, this is for the feeling of coming to the edge of something you have been resisting, coming to the edge of. The place where hope and grief finally stop fighting each other and something quieter starts to settle in. The place that does not feel like giving up and does not feel like resolution and does not feel like anything you were warned about. It feels like the beginning of something honest. If something you are watching is landing, leave a like and stay connected by subscribing. Drop the words "I am ready to feel this" in the comments. Not because you are okay, because you are finally willing to stop pretending you are not. There is a question living underneath all of this. You can feel it even when you do not say it out loud. You want to know whether the connection is real. You want to know what your chart actually says about where this is going. You want someone to look at your specific energy, your specific birth blueprint, and tell you what is actually happening here, not a general answer but yours. That is what the Twin Flame Union personal reading is for. This is a fully personalized audio reading and detailed written report built from your exact birth information. It looks at the karmic indicators in your chart tied to this connection, where you are in your journey right now, what is currently being orchestrated on your behalf, and what your soul contract with this person actually means. Not a template, not a general twin flame video, your chart, your connection, your path forward. You can order yours right now directly through the link below. Your reading will arrive in your inbox within 48 hours. There is a grief that has no clean name. It is not the grief of death, where the person is gone and the world agrees you are allowed to mourn. It is not the grief of a regular breakup where your friends understand and the timeline makes sense and eventually you are supposed to feel better. This grief is stranger than that. This grief is for someone who is still alive. Someone you may have spoken to recently or not in months, and either way you still feel them. Someone who in some part of you is still so present that the idea of actually losing them feels physically impossible, like trying to grieve your own heartbeat. The psychologist Pauline Boss gave this a name. She called it ambiguous loss. A loss without closure. A loss that the people around you cannot fully validate because the relationship never officially ended, because there is no funeral, because you are not allowed to grieve something that technically still exists. What she found in decades of research is that ambiguous loss is uniquely destabilizing. It keeps the nervous system in a suspended state. Part of you is grieving. Part of you is still hoping. And those two things cannot coexist without cost. Your body is paying that cost right now. The tightness in your chest that appears at random moments, the way you can be completely fine and then a song comes on, or you pass a restaurant you went to once and suddenly you are back in it, back in the feeling of him, back in the grief you thought you had moved past. The exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from holding two incompatible realities at the same time. This is not weakness. This is what ambiguous loss does to a human nervous system. What makes this particular grief so disorienting is that it has no social script. When someone dies, there are rituals. There are people who bring food. There are customs that mark the ending and give the people left behind something to hold on to. When a conventional relationship ends, there is at least the language for it. There are friends who understand. There is a timeline that society recognizes even if it is painful. But you cannot explain twin flame separation to most people in your life. You have probably tried. You have watched their faces and seen the moment they started looking for a polite way to redirect the conversation. You have felt the loneliness of a grief that the people you love cannot locate in any recognizable category. That loneliness compounds the loss. Not only are you grieving him, you are grieving without a witness. Without the kind of validation that comes from being seen in your pain by people who understand exactly what you are carrying. That is part of why this content exists, not just to give you information, but to name what you are living through in a way that makes it real. What you are experiencing is legitimate grief. It deserves to be treated as such. Mercury entering Gemini today is shifting the mental atmosphere. Where your thinking has been slow, fixed, perhaps circular in the way thinking gets, when you are emotionally stuck, you are going to notice a quickening. Clarity arriving in pieces, thoughts completing themselves. And in that clarity, some things that you have been half knowing for a while may finally finish coming into focus. One of them is this: you have been grieving him for longer than you have admitted to yourself. The grief started before you were ready to call it that. It started the first time he pulled away and you noticed how much it hurt. The first time you explained something to him and watched him not receive it and felt a small, specific ache in your chest that you immediately covered over with hope. The first time you caught yourself adjusting your expectations down, quietly, without ceremony, because the alternative was too painful to hold. You have been grieving in silence, grieving without the language for it. Grieving while simultaneously maintaining the argument that everything was fine, that you just needed to keep working on yourself, that the shift was coming. And some of that is still true. The shift may be coming. The work has not been wasted. But here is what grief theory teaches us about how healing actually happens. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross mapped the stages of grief not as a linear path, but as a terrain you move through in your own order, revisiting different territories at different times. Which she and the researcher David Kessler later added to that map is a stage that comes after acceptance. They called it meaning. Meaning is not the same as understanding. You do not have to understand why this happened to find meaning in it. Meaning is what you build from what this has changed in you. What you learned about yourself in the silence, what you discovered you were capable of carrying. What you found out about your own love when it was tested in ways ordinary love never gets tested. You are somewhere in that terrain right now, not at the end of it, but moving through it, and the movement feels different than the waiting did. Waiting has a tightness to it, a holding of breath, a constant low-grade scanning of the environment for signals. Waiting feels like the body in a permanent brace position. Grief has a different texture. Grief feels more like release. Not comfortable release, not pleasant release, but real movement. Like something is finally flowing that was previously dammed up. When acceptance starts to arrive, it often does not feel like relief. It feels like loss. Because accepting that he may not come back in the way you imagined, or that even if he does, it will not look like what you pictured, that is a real loss. The loss of a specific version of the future you had built in your mind. You are allowed to grieve that version. You are allowed to feel the loss of the future you imagined. Without that meaning, you are giving up on what is real between you. There is a particular loneliness to being the divine feminine in this journey. You feel things first. That is not a spiritual claim, it is just what has been true for you consistently. You sensed the connection before he acknowledged it. You understood what was happening between you before he had language for it. You have felt the shifts in the energy between you, the moments of distance and the moments of pull, often before anything changed in the physical reality. And so you are often in the position of knowing something that he is not yet ready to know. Right now, you may be moving toward acceptance while he is still somewhere in the earlier stages of his own reckoning, still in the denial, still in the bargaining, telling himself that what he pushed away was not what he knows it was, still in the part where it is easier to not feel it than to feel it. This gap is one of the most painful things about the twin flame dynamic. You are rarely in the same place at the same time. You are never having the same experience simultaneously. What you are processing today, he may not begin to process for months. And it is not because he is less evolved or less spiritually aware in some categorical way. It is because the journey works differently on the masculine, where the divine feminine processes outward through feeling and language and connection. The divine masculine processes inward. He suppresses first, then rationalizes. Then, eventually, in his own private timing, begins to reckon with what he has been carrying. Right now, while you are moving toward acceptance, he may be in a completely different emotional weather system. He may be telling himself that the distance was the right choice. He may be filling the space with noise, activity, other people, anything that prevents him from sitting in the quiet where the truth of the connection lives. That suppression will not hold indefinitely. It never does. What gets suppressed in this kind of connection does not disappear. It circulates. It shows up in dreams, in the hollow feeling after time with someone else, in the moments when he is doing something completely ordinary and a specific memory of you surfaces with a clarity that stops him. He is having his own experience. It is just not visible to you right now. And what that means in practice is that your healing cannot wait for his. Your acceptance cannot be paused until he catches up. Your grief has to be allowed to move through you at its own pace, not at the pace of the dynamic, not at the pace of his timeline, not at the pace of the story you want to be telling. This is the work the divine feminine is being asked to do right now, not to abandon the connection, not to stop loving him, but to stop making his timeline the container for her experience. Her grief is hers. Her healing is hers. Her movement forward is hers. And that independence, that willingness to feel what she feels on her own schedule without waiting for his participation, is not a betrayal of the connection. It is what makes her capable of holding it. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from not being able to see your own progress. You have been doing the work. You know you have. But when you're in the middle of something this emotionally complex, it is almost impossible to see how far you have actually come. One hard day can feel like evidence that nothing has changed. One moment of missing him can make everything you have built feel like it disappeared. That is why tracking matters. The Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook is a 39-page system designed specifically for women in the middle of this journey who need to see their movement in black and white. Not to perform healing for anyone else, not to prove anything, but because when grief is ambiguous and the timeline is unclear and progress feels invisible, having a concrete record of where you were and where you are now changes something in the nervous system. It tracks your stage month by month. It logs your synchronicities so you stop forgetting them. It gives you a daily check-in that keeps you the center of your own story instead of an afterthought in his. It has a weekly reflection section that reveals patterns you cannot see when you are too close to them. It has monthly reviews that show you your transformation in a form you can actually read and trust. If you have been circling the same emotional territory and you cannot tell whether you are healing or spinning, this workbook will show you the difference. The link is below. There is something acceptance asks that nobody warns you about. It asks you to hold two things at once. The love is real, and the future you imagined may not be the future that comes. Both of those can be true at the same time. The love does not need to be false for the story to take a different shape than you planned. The connection does not need to have been a mistake for the next chapter to look different from what you were hoping for. Acceptance is not deciding the connection was nothing. Acceptance is expanding your definition of what the connection means. This is where Kubler-Ross and Kessler's sixth stage, the meaning stage, becomes important. The people who find meaning in loss are not the people who decided the loss did not matter. They are the people who allowed the loss to matter, who felt it fully, and who then asked what it was building in them. What is this building in you? That is not a rhetorical question. Something real is being constructed in the interior of your life right now. A kind of self-knowledge that does not come from easy experience. A capacity for love that is deeper than the love most people settle for. A clarity about what you will and will not accept that you did not have before this journey started. Here is something else grief theory reveals that most people do not talk about. Kessler found in his research on grief and meaning that the people who were most able to eventually find peace after a profound loss were not the ones who moved on fastest. They were not the ones who suppressed the grief most efficiently. They were the ones who were willing to feel the full weight of what they had lost and simultaneously refused to let that loss be the final word on their life. Both things together. The full weight of the loss and the refusal to be finished. You can grieve him completely and still choose yourself. Those are not opposites. In fact, for the divine feminine in this journey, they are often the same movement. The deeper she goes into the grief, the more clearly she arrives at herself. The more fully she feels the loss of the version of the future she imagined, the more room she has to build a version of the present that belongs entirely to her. This is the alchemy the journey is designed to produce, not reunion as the endpoint, wholeness as the endpoint. And reunion, if it comes, as an expression of two whole people finally meeting, rather than two incomplete people hoping to complete each other. None of that requires him to come back by a certain date. None of that requires a reunion that looks exactly like the one you pictured. It requires you to keep feeling what you feel, keep moving through the terrain, and keep refusing to make your expansion contingent on his readiness. You are not at the beginning of this anymore. That is worth saying clearly, because on the hard days it can feel like you are back at square one. Like every wave of grief means the work has been undone. Like every moment of missing him erases everything you have built. It does not. The wave comes and you know how to breathe through it now. That is different from 6 months ago. You do not dissolve the way you did the first time. You do not immediately reach for your phone. You do not immediately start replaying every conversation looking for evidence that you misread something. You feel it and you come back. You come back faster than you used to. That is growth. Even when it does not look like growth. Even when it arrives inside a wave of missing him that takes your breath away for a minute, you come back. And the coming back is faster. And the solid ground you return to is more solid than it was before. This is what healing in a twin flame journey actually looks like. Not a clean linear arc toward not feeling anything. A spiral. You return to the same territory with more capacity each time. More ground underneath you. More of yourself available to meet what comes. Grief that returns is not regression. It is the spiral nature of healing. You are not back at the beginning. You are visiting the same emotional territory from a higher vantage point. With more capacity, with more of yourself intact, with something underneath you now that was not there the first time you moved through this. That something is exactly what the twin flame journey builds. Not a relationship, not yet, maybe not in the shape you imagined, but a self. A more integrated, more complete, more genuinely grounded version of who you came here to be. The connection is part of that construction. His absence has been part of that construction. The grief is part of that construction. Right now, with Mercury moving into Gemini and mental clarity sharpening, you may begin to see this more clearly than you have been able to see it before. Not the full picture, but more of it. And what you see may not be what you were expecting to see. It may be someone you recognize, someone stronger than the person who started this journey. Someone who loves deeply and will not compromise herself to prove it. Someone who has learned that the most honest thing she can do for this connection is to let herself be fully, genuinely, unashamedly okay. Not because he came back, because she did. That is what the end of waiting looks like, not a reunion, not a grand gesture, just a woman who stopped outsourcing her peace and started building it from the inside out. And that woman, that version of her is who this was always leading toward. Not as a consolation prize for a connection that did not work out, as the actual destination, the person she became through this. The love she learned to give herself in the absence of the love she was waiting for. The ground she found when the ground she was standing on was pulled away. That is real. That is not small. That is everything the journey was designed to produce. And if he comes to that. He comes to someone who does not need him to be okay. He comes to someone who chose herself so completely that loving him became something she does freely rather than something she does desperately. That changes everything about what the reunion looks like. That changes everything about what kind of love becomes possible. You are not waiting anymore. You are building. And what you are building right now, in this grief, in this acceptance, in this quiet turning toward yourself, that is the foundation everything else rests on.